I pity the fool who can't see you, 'cause I can see you, a fool. Give me that hat. I ain't going on no top rope, Jeff Hardy. I ain't going on it.
Champ is here now. That's right, the champ is here. I'm the champ now. Come see this, fool.
I ain't doing this. I'm out of here. Forget this. We just got the new San Diego Comic-Con 2020 exclusive Mr. T WWE Elite figure, and we're checking it out today, so stick around. Hey, this is Matthew, and welcome back to Nerd News Today. And what you can see in front of us today is the not quite San Diego Comic-Con 2020 WWE Mattel Elite exclusive Mr. T. And of course, it's not quite the SDCC 2020 exclusive because, well, San Diego Comic-Con did not happen this year. So yeah, this is now just a summer exclusive, but either way, it was still super hard to get, folks. This figure here, it sold out really quick when it first went for pre-order on Entertainment Earth's website. They then put it back up maybe 2 or 3 weeks later on Mattel Creations website, and that sold out immediately also. So yeah, I was one of the folks who was lucky enough to get this as part of the first wave when this came out on Entertainment Earth, and I finally got it in the mail today, so we are going to take a look at it right now. So first things first, this is the mailer box that you get with the package. This is what's holding the toy, and this is how you know this is pretty legit, because this is like what Mattel used to do with their Masters of the Universe Classics figures and other high-end collectibles like that. They were put in this mailer box rather than being just shipped out with the figure itself. So it's really nice. It's very red. It's got a pretty good-looking graphic of some Mr. T's chains there, but with the WWE Elite Collection logo in there. And it's also pretty high-quality cardboard. It's pretty nice, but yeah, we're not here to look at the mailer box, so I'm gonna go ahead, pop this guy open, because I already cut the tape off camera to make this a little bit easier for me. And this is the package that actually holds our Mr. T figure. So this is unlike our typical action figure packaging from Mattel's Elite lineup, because this is meant to resemble a VHS cover, a VHS tape back from Wrestlemania 1. Back in the days of Coliseum Video, and when they used to do those very large, oversized VHS boxes. They're pretty iconic these days, and they're still really awesome to look at. It's just so cool seeing the artwork full size. And that's exactly what also this image on the front here is meant to mimic. This is meant to mimic the WrestleMania 1 cover, which in reality he actually shared with Hulk Hogan. And you can see a picture of that here. And what's really fun about this box art here is, aside from getting the illustration very similar to how Hulk and Mr. T were on the cover of the first tape, they've also got the font and the logo design looking the same. They've also got this sticker here, which is looking pretty close to identical as well. I mean, from all angles, this is a really, really clever packaging. I really like what they did here with this one. This is, you know, not quite on par with the Shockmaster, because the Shockmaster was a stroke of brilliance, but this is still a really great way to package the figure. The side of the box, as I mentioned, it just has the logo once again, when it says Mr. T in really big gold font letters, because you can't say Mr. T in any other way. And here's a look at the back of the box, which you can see again has a photo of Mr. T from roughly that era, a photo montage behind him, and a bio here explaining a little bit about, well, what's going on with this figure here. But really, this bio doesn't actually say that much to it. It basically just mentions that, you know, the first sentence is that Mr. T's impact and importance to WWE cannot be overstated. And then it goes on to mention that he was in the very first WrestleMania main event as Hulk Hogan's teammate. And then it kind of just is done with wrestling at that point. And then talks about him being a big TV and film star, talks about his look, and then it mentions he made it into the Hall of Fame, making his mama proud because he loves his mama. If you heard his Hall of Fame speech, you would know. But it really doesn't mention much of what he actually did besides that WrestleMania 1 main event in WWE, or WWF back at the time. Because Mr. T was there a lot longer than just his WrestleMania 1 tenure. And of course, we know he wanted to be at WrestleMania 2 to have a boxing match at Roddy Piper. But even then, he still did more than just that. And that kind of tells us a little bit about the story of this figure itself. So let's go ahead and just jump into that right now. So another cool thing about this packaging here is that it folds open. That's really epic packaging. And so what you can see on the left side here is, again, some more photos of Mr. T and his time in WWE. And specifically, this looks to be all around the time of WrestleMania 1. Which is interesting because it's kind of inaccurate to this toy, but we'll get to that in a moment. So what I think is really cool about the packaging here in particular is that this is how you open the figure. This slides out, in theory. This slides out like that, and that is how you get to the figure. I've got a good look now at what this Mr. T comes with, so I'm gonna go ahead and take this other piece of the plastic out over here, and let's see. So there are a few rubber bands and things in there which I'm gonna have to cut out. So I'm gonna go take care of that and get Mr. T loose, and let's come back and take a closer look at him. And here is our Mr. T now out of the packaging. And it's a really, really awesome looking figure just from the get-go here. But let's break this thing down one piece at a time, and let's start with that likeness. So does this look like Mr. T? I've seen a few early reviews of the figure before it was released, and there's been some debate about the likeness, whether or not it's actually close to Mr. T's face. And I have to say, I think Mr. T has a pretty hard face to actually capture. He has a very, very unique sort of brow and a facial structure that's really hidden a lot by his beard. And he also has the kind of face where his eyes are kind of sunken further back, and because of his brow shape, tends to be darker shadow cast into his eyes, depending on how he's lit, which is usually meant to be fairly dramatic. I think that's one of the problems that we have with toys in general, is folks, when they look at a character, they're kind of idealizing it in their head, versus how a lot of wrestling toys are made today, which is scanning their faces. We lose a lot of that idealization that we get when we sculpt a figure. Because you can straight up scan a person's face in a computer, and it's gonna be 110% the way they look in real life, but it might not actually capture the feeling of that person. So I think Mr. T is a good example out here in particular, because chances are they did in fact scan his head at some point, but because they did a scan and not a hand sculpt, they then had to de-age him a little bit. And that's where things can get a little funky. But even then, whether or not they hand sculpted this or they got it by computer, I think the likeness is pretty close. I'd give this an 8 out of 10 on the likeness. I like the facial expression that it has. I think, in particular from a 3/4 profile, it looks way, way better. Like head on, it's a little funky, but again, I think that's just based on how your lighting is going to be set up. But 3/4, I think they definitely nailed it. You can see just that mean snarl on his face. And, profile too, I think they definitely got it. Front is just, it's weird because we're used to seeing him a certain way, and I think that's probably the biggest difference maker in that likeness. And of course, we can't not talk about Mr. T's signature mohawk in this figure, and that is definitely his mohawk. There's no argument here that they've absolutely captured the mohawk. Shape looks good. I think the one thing to watch out for on this is the paint, because sometimes the paint is a little bit uneven in some spots. I've noticed that in the last 2 years or so, since Mattel kind of changed how they're doing their paint application, that beards in particular can suffer. But luckily, Mr. T has a thicker beard than like Seth Rollins. Let's say he's a pretty good example of them having not so great paint jobs. But Mr. T's beard is a lot thicker, very nicely detailed, and a lot easier to apply paint on. So for the most part, it's pretty decent, but there definitely is some slop on various parts of the mohawk, mostly on the top of his head. But there is some on his mustache too, and unfortunately, you're not gonna know how yours looks until you get it out of the box. Now, Mr. T is known for his gold chains and for his outfits, but what outfit is this exactly that we're looking at here? Because this is not Wrestlemania 1. And when I looked at Entertainment Alert's website, in fact, where they talk about the figure, they were saying that the figure is inspired by his wrestling debut or his Wrestlemania debut, something like that. Or maybe even said WWE debut. But none of that seems to be accurate based on my research here. So we know this is not WrestleMania 1 because of the color of his tights here. At WrestleMania 1, the tights were red, not blue. When Mr. T made his first appearance a little bit before WrestleMania 1 at the War to Settle the Score, he was also not wearing this outfit. This is kind of more like the greatest hits of Mr. T in a way. So let's just, I guess, kind of take this figure apart piece by piece, and we'll take off the accessories as we talk about which era they're meant to be. So starting with this outfit here, which has got the camouflage jacket, it's got the weightlifting belt, that's Mr. T's special golden belt. So when exactly was that from? Well, if we look from the waist up, this actually represents a period much later in Mr. T's WWF career because he stuck around for a little bit longer. And in fact, you can actually find this video on YouTube. This represents when he was in the ring with Macho Man in 1987. He had a face-off with Macho Man Randy Savage, basically saying he's going to be the new enforcer in the WWF. And he came out here dressed pretty much just like this from the waist up. However, from the waist down in that promo, he was wearing camouflage pants completely. Now, I didn't go back to check if all of the jewelry was 100% accurate, and I'm not going to do that because that's going to be crazy. But yeah, let's just start talking about some of the other accessories as we get him into his wrestling gear. So the number one thing is those gold chains. These are gorgeous looking chains. This is some great sculpting detail. Like, there's so much going on in this from every angle. Like, man, that's nuts, Mr. T. That's absolutely nuts. Just so much detail, so many really cool little things in there. That's a really, really exciting piece, and I love the color on this thing too. It really does pop against Mr. T here. So let's see how easy this is to get off. Well, it is a softer plastic, so that's good. I don't think we're gonna need to pop Mr. T's head off, although, to be honest, it probably would help if you did, but I don't feel like doing that because it is coming off, and it's off. There we go. So Mr. T also has his custom weightlifting belt, as we mentioned, and that is held together pretty much the same way a championship belt is held. And you can see here in this case, it's not fully sealed around his waist, so hopefully we're gonna be able to get that back on because that came off fairly easily. And so now without his weightlifting belt, this actually becomes, again, another version of Mr. T. So this version here, we now jump back in time further towards WrestleMania 1. And this kind of reminds me of the time from when Roddy Piper went on the set of the A-Team or whatever show Mr. T was on at the time, or whatever quote-unquote set they were going to have him at, where Roddy Piper came over to Mr. T and basically cut a promo on him. They had a face-to-face confrontation. And there, Mr. T was only wearing the camouflage jacket. Again, I think he was probably wearing camel pants. He definitely wasn't wearing wrestling tights because that was on the set of a movie or TV show. So at this point now, if you had a Roddy Piper toy next to him, you could then reenact that segment. And this camouflage jacket is also really, really nice. For some reason, his collar is popped up there, but whatever. Yeah, it's a really good-looking material. Feels nice. This is a warning though for you people out there who are loose collectors, just for you to be aware in case you already don't know this. But if you got an action figure who has a fabric accessory like this camouflage jacket here, be warned, if it's not on display, you might want to actually take the jacket off because that will eventually bleed onto the figure and ruin it. But if you don't mind that, then whatever, leave it as is, not a big deal. And while I take this off too, I want to mention that his gold around his arm here, it actually is detachable. You can see that right there. So that we can just pop right off. And let's see, I don't know about this one. I think this one appears to be a separate piece actually. All right, so if we pop his hand off, which I'll do in a second, we'll be able to get that bracelet off as well. So let's get Mr. T out of his jacket. And now let's talk about what this wrestling gear is, because this has been, I know, driving people really crazy, the fact that he doesn't have his WrestleMania outfit. This is just some other blue color. So these blue tights here represent Mr. T, not at WrestleMania 1, not WrestleMania 2, but at the very first Saturday Night's main event, which saw Hulk Hogan take on Cowboy Bob Orton, or Ace Bob Orton, the bodyguard of Roddy Piper. And it also saw Mr. T in another segment where I think they came to rescue Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff, from being beat up by Ace and Roddy Piper. They were basically, because this happened right after WrestleMania, after they had lost the match and Orndorff got pinned, causing the team of Piper and Mr. Wonderful to lose. So they were having a promo together with basically those two fighting each other, and then Ace attacks him, and Piper starts beating him down too, but Mr. T comes out, helps Paul Orndorff, and basically that's, I guess, the babyface turn of Mr. Wonderful. But yeah, this is the outfit he's wearing because at that point he was wearing the blue pants. Now as for the boots, I could not really pinpoint exactly what they're from. They kind of remind me of the WrestleMania 1 boots. They might have been what he was wearing at Saturday Night's main event also, but he might have been just wearing sneakers. Like, I don't believe he actually wore full wrestling boots ever. Maybe someone out there can correct me, but I'm pretty sure he just typically wore like running sneakers or something similar to that. But he did have gold shoes at some point with red laces. I don't know if he had red and blue, but he must have if they did this. I don't really know though. If anybody out there does know for a fact though, any more details about his costume, do let me know in the comments below because I'm very curious. As far as I'm concerned, it is a mishmash of several time periods with Mr. T, but if there's one definitive version of Mr. T that's meant to be this figure, you know, I want to know, so let me know in the comments, please. Now, I'm not sure if Mr. T also had blue knee pads ever to go with those, so that's another mystery to me. And if anybody out there can solve that one as well, let me know. So we basically already kind of went through most of Mr. T's accessories because that is the weightlifting belt, the bracelets, the gold chains around his neck, and the camouflage jacket. But he does come with an additional pair of hands because you can see here in the hands that Mr. T has, they're full of rings and stuff. These are entrance hands. Like, you can't have a wrestling match with that. Jesse Ventura would freak out if he saw that Mr. T was bending the rules like this wearing all his gold. So he comes with a separate pair of plain hands that are meant just for wrestling. So I'm gonna pop these hands out like this. They come out nice and easy. This gold chain should now, in theory, pop off. And we got some plain old wrestling fingers for Mr. T here. There we go, just like that. So that's Mr. T with his plain old wrestling hands. Now, according to the box, Mr. T features 25 points of articulation. Let's break those down too. We've got a ball-jointed head. We've got ball-jointed shoulders that are really stiff out the box here, folks. We have the bicep swivel. We have a single elbow joint. We have the wrists that can turn and flex back and forth. We have the typical elite articulation in the chest. We got the buck that bends and an extremely stiff waist. Oh, I just broke his spine, by God. We've got ball-jointed legs so that Mr. T can get in his signature Mr. T split, or as he called it, the T-bone. He didn't actually call it that, I'm just making that up, but man, that's pretty great flexibility. We've got the thigh articulation, double-jointed knee, boot rotates, and the ankle can move as well. So yeah, pretty much they got all the articulation, nothing hindering it. That's good to know. And for reference, here is how he stands up with another WWE figure. I happen to just have Kurt Hawkins here. So that's how he looks next to Kurt. And here is an AEW figure. We've got the little bit of the bubbly Chris Jericho. If you haven't seen our review of that, go ahead and check it out. We like this figure a lot, even though the face had a few issues. But here's how they all look together. And yeah, they're pretty much obviously all in scale. I mean, obviously the Elite will be in scale with the Elite, but AEW is also, you know, fairly close in scale, just slightly different appearance because of the bodies. So the big question now is, was this Mr. T worth all the suffering and pain to get him? Well, to be perfectly honest, I got lucky because I was able to get him fairly quickly. You know, when that pre-order went on sale at Entertainment Earth, I jumped on it and I got it immediately. I was one of the lucky folks who did get it. So at this point, it's really more or less, is this figure worth going on eBay or other places to get from third-party vendors? And that's tough. I think if you're gonna have to get this, paying more than double the price would not be worth it. I would say, honestly, wait a few months. Hopefully this will drop. I don't see this one getting nearly as expensive as the Macho Man Slim Jim got, and that's because, in my mind, this is not really the most iconic Mr. T. What you're mostly paying for is that packaging. And, you know, what's, of course, a classic Mattel move to do here is that once Mr. T came out, about, I guess, a few weeks later when San Diego Comic-Con at home happened, that's when the design team revealed that there's going to be additional Mr. T figures, because we are going to be getting a Mr. T in their Masters of the Universe line, and we're also going to get another Mr. T Elite 2-pack with Roddy Piper, where they're both going to have boxing gloves to relive their WrestleMania 2 boxing match. And even with that, I'm pretty positive there's going to be at least 1 or 2 more Mr. T figures, because, well, they haven't done him in the WrestleMania 1 outfit. So my theory about that is there could be potentially another 2-pack, and I think that could be a 2-pack with a classic Hogan figure from WrestleMania 1. I think that would be the best way, in fact, to do that figure. Like, I don't know if a Mr. T Elite would be as interesting on its own with the red pants. I think if they package it with a classic Hogan, because Hogan hasn't had a classic figure since his defining moments of figure. So that would be like the best way to do it. That's just my 2 cents on it. And to be honest, I think, you know, it's probably worth waiting a little bit just to see if they do make that. And I don't think that that figure is going to come anytime soon. Like maybe holiday season, maybe spring of next year, because they plan pretty far ahead. But the fact is they're doing a bunch of Mr. T things, and they've skipped out on the most iconic Mr. T moment from WrestleMania 1. So don't be surprised if that comes out. And right now, everybody's still on the craze about trying to get this figure because it's the hot one to get right now. Give it some time, wait a little bit, and then see how you feel in a few months, see how the market stabilizes, and then try and find it on eBay if you really want it. You know, compared to the Slim Jim Macho Man, that figure now fetches a lot more than what it went for. And that was a lot easier to get in a lot of ways, because that was like a limit of, I think, 4 figures. This Mr. T was a limit of 1. But even with the limit of 1, you know, people want the Macho Man, I think, a lot more, because that's Slim Jim Macho. It's a really crazy gimmick. This Mr. T is really cool. The box is really great. But, you know, the fact that we're already seeing additional Mr. Ts come out, you know, I think it's just worth being a little bit patient for and seeing what Mattel does next. But if you really, really want to get this figure, yeah, I totally recommend it. I'm very happy with this figure. I am a little chronologically confused about the outfit, though. So like I said earlier, if anybody can really clarify what this deal is with this figure, I want to know, because in my mind, it's multiple different versions of Mr. T, but maybe I'm missing something here. And unfortunately, the box tells us nothing, and the Entertainment description tells us nothing. So I'm sure there's some hardcore fan watching right now who can enlighten all of us, so please go ahead and do that if you know anything I don't know about this outfit. But overall, I pity the fool who doesn't add a Mr. T to their collection at some point, but it might not be the best one to get right now. So to all you collectors out there, be a little patient, watch the market, and see where it goes. So that's our look at the not quite San Diego Comic-Con 2020 Mr. T WWE Elite exclusive action figure from Mattel. Very cool figure, very cool piece. I hope you guys liked this Mr. T, and I hope you guys liked this review and found it entertaining and informative. And if you did, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new here. I hope you'll stick around to see all the other wrestling content we do here, as well as all the other figure reviews and everything else happening very soon here on Nerd News Today. So until next time, I'm Matthew. I pity the fool who don't like, share, and subscribe this video. And we'll see you guys here next time.